Okay, so this is a video about how to find scholarly articles for your You Decide presentation, and this will help you in other classes where you have to do research using the library. But anyway, for this class, for your You Decide assignment, your group is expected to find at minimum 3 books or articles, scholarly books or articles about the topic that you're presenting on. So what is a scholarly article? It's an article published in an academic journal, for instance, the Journal of Women's History or the Journal of African American History. The Journal of American History is one of the biggest, most significant journals in the field of American history. There's also the Journal of Early American History, ASLAN, a Journal of Chicano Studies, TSQ, Transgender Studies Quarterly, and so on. There are lots of journals that exist about history that are useful, right? Where you can find articles about subjects that you won't necessarily find books about. There are lots of articles that are published. That are never appear as a book. Why am I asking you to find scholarly articles? So scholarly articles are associated with um, a university. They're edited by historians or other academics or scholars in the field, and they're generally published by university presses. This means that they are more reliable sources of information. Scholarly articles are also peer-reviewed, so other scholars in the field who have expertise in the topic review the journal to determine if it should be published. When they review say if I wrote up an article and I submitted it to be published in the Journal of American History, the reviewers, the scholars, they ask themselves, right, is this original research? Is it reliable research? Does it add something new and interesting and relevant to the field of history, and so on? And they determine whether or not they want to publish your article in the journal. So using the ARC Library website, there are 3 main ways to find scholarly articles. First, go to the library website, which you can see up here, arc.losrios.edu/arclibrary. You can use one search. That's the first way. If you want to just find articles, click on Scholarly Journals. Say that your topic is the history of welfare in the United States. You can try using various search terms, like say history of welfare. Very general. Let's see what comes up. Okay, so the house of industry that costs too much, fiscal conservatism, and the history of American welfare. So I'm looking at this and I think, okay, Rhode Island history, that's a pretty minor journal about a very specific place in the United States. It's good that it's more recently published. That means it's more up to date. Its scholarship is more up to date. Let's scroll down. But I look at the journal and I think, okay, this is not the most important, significant, or widely read journal in the field of history. The standards are not going to be quite as strong as for other journals. Like, for instance, the Journal of American History. Again, the most significant journal in the historical profession is the Journal of American History, so I know that this would be a useful article. It's a vetted article, it's been peer-reviewed, it has quality research. Let's see, this says, Before the War, U.S. Unemployment Relief After World War I and the Long History of a Paternalist Welfare Policy. So this could be interesting because the birth of the federal welfare state is around the time of World War I. It changes dramatically in the 30s and then in the period after World War II, but we really see the beginnings of federal welfare in the context of the First World War. So this could be a useful article. It doesn't say anything about gender or women, so it's yet to be seen how relevant it is for a women's history class. Okay, then I see British colonialism and women's welfare in the Gold Coast. Oh, Africa Today. Oh yeah, so I realized that my search terms, I just said the history of welfare. I didn't say history of welfare in the United States, so that means I'm going to get articles about the history of welfare um, in other parts of the world. Okay, so why don't I go back and change my search, since I didn't think about the fact that I needed to make it a little bit more narrow. So I could say United States, and we'll see what comes up. Just searching through scholarly journals again. Okay, so some of the same articles came up, which are about the United States. So I'm going down and I think, okay, I don't actually see anything about gender or women, so just to make sure that, well, here's about, this is Men in the House, Race, Welfare, and the Regulation of Men's Sexuality in the U.S., 1961 to 72. This actually looks like a really good article for a presentation on the history of welfare in a women's history class, because it talks about the regulation of men's sexuality. It talks about race. This men in the, if you know about the history of welfare, you know that the man in the house rule was a rule that was actually quite sexist, and so it does relate to women's history. So I'll download it. I guess I have to log in. I didn't log in. It's taking a minute. Okay, well, here it is. I don't really want to read it in this reader. I'd rather open it up in a different reader, so I'm going to save it. Article on welfare. And then it's going to open up, and this is much easier to read, and I probably would print this out. So you can see that this is about 22 pages. That is normal for academic articles. So they're much shorter than full books, of course. But look, this looks like a, if you look at the footnotes, you'll find sources, other sources, about the history of welfare. Mimi Abramovitz, Regulating the Lives of Women's Social Welfare Policy from Colonial Times to the Present. This is basically a classic in the history of welfare. Ricky Solinger, Wake Up Little Susie. This is a really good book that would be really relevant. Linda Gordon is one of the most prominent historians in the field of women's history. Pitied, Not Entitled Single Mothers in the History of Welfare. So this is a good way to actually find books as well by looking at the footnotes. Okay, so there's one article. That looks really useful, but I need more than one article because I need 3 sources. So let me go back and do another search. So the other search that I would do for this, the history of welfare, I know that there's a massive welfare rights movement in the 1960s. So why don't I say welfare rights movement? I know that it was led by women, particularly black women. It's sort of an extension of both the women's movement and the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And tens of thousands of people were involved in this movement. So welfare rights movement seems like a good search term. Okay, so looking at this, Social Movement Studies, this is a sociological journal, so it could be useful, but it looks a little bit technical. Frame Diagnosis in the Welfare Rights Movement. So I would maybe read that, but I think I'll continue scrolling down. This one is perfect. Expanding the Boundaries of the Women's Movement, Black Feminism and the Struggle for Welfare Rights. Feminist Studies is one of the main journals within the field of women's history and women's studies. Pramila Natison has written extensively. She's written whole books about the history of welfare and the history of the welfare rights movement. So this is an article that I definitely want. I would download this. This looks good as well. Felicia Kornblue. Again, feminist studies. So I see this and I think it looks quite good because it's in the Feminist Studies Journal. Spring 98, that's a bit older. It's not too old though. 2002 is a little bit more recent, so the scholarship that that author is engaging in is perhaps a little bit more up to date than the previous article. Going down. So do I want this article, Welfare and Rights Before the Movement? Probably not. It's the Yale Law Journal. I'm not sure. It seems like if it's in the Yale Law Journal, it's going to be too legalistic. Maybe not as historical. And I'm a little uncertain about what that's going to be like. So I'm not sure if I want that. This one looks perfect. Journal of Women's History, the main journal in the field of women's history. That looks really good. The Price of Progressive Politics. Oh, this looks good too. This is in a journal called Social Forces, which is a sociology journal, but it could still be good. There is a field of historical sociology that's relevant to the field of history. Okay, so that's good. Now I want to show you another way. So one search is very useful, but my preferred method of searching for academic journals is using the JSTOR database. So you can find JSTOR, which I have open in a tab here, by going to the library website. Here, let's go back to the library website, clicking on Research Databases. So if you click on that, that'll take you here to the list of databases that you can access through the ARC library website. Google Scholar is useful, but I'm more interested in JSTOR. So here's JSTOR. This brings you to the simple search function of the JSTOR website, but I'm going to go to advanced search because what the advantage of using JSTOR is this, the advanced search section, because what you can do is a bunch of things. So you can say, well, I'm looking for books, so I want to find book reviews, and you can just click this. Say reviews, and then welfare rights movement, and this will bring up books that you can read reviews about to decide if it's a good book, a relevant book. So look, the first thing that comes up is Welfare Warriors, the Welfare Rights Movement in the U.S. by Pramila Natison, who we just talked about. She's one of the main historians of the welfare rights movement. So that's how you can find book reviews. But perhaps even more usefully, I'll unclick that and click articles. So I just want articles, that's it. It allows you to narrow your search. So if you don't want older articles, for instance, I can say from 1990 to the year 2016 or 17. I don't want, if we go past 1990, the scholarship is going to be a little out of date. It still could be useful, but out of date. Say you want to search only through the Journal of Women's History. Okay, then click search. So you have to know, of course, the journal that you want to search to be able to do that. And actually, that didn't work. It's bringing up all of these other journals, so apparently I didn't do that correctly. I wonder why. What did I do? Oh, I think I need the ISBN. Okay, let's skip this. I don't want to look up the ISBN right now. So what I'll do is say, okay, I'm really interested in Black women's involvement in the movement for welfare rights, so I'll click African American Studies and see what that brings up before I do anything else, because that's already a lot of journals just about in African American Studies. Look, again, Pramila Natison, you're getting clued into the fact how big of a scholar she is. From Widow to Welfare Queen, Welfare and the Politics of Race, which I can tell traces this idea that welfare was justified when it mainly was for white widows, but as soon as welfare becomes racialized and black women are described as welfare queens, there's sort of an anti-welfare movement that pops up, politics that pops up in the United States, and we start to see the weakening of the welfare state once it becomes racialized in that way. So this looks like it has some decent articles all about black women in particular and and poverty and the welfare rights movement. Okay, let's do another search term. Let's say I want to look for information on the first National Women's Rights Convention, Seneca Falls Convention, which is in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. I only want articles. I'm going to click now on, let's see, scrolling down. I could click history, but you can see here that it has 511 journals within the field of history. That's a lot, so that's going to bring up a lot. Maybe I'll narrow my search and just go down to, let's see, feminist and women's studies. It's a bit more narrow. It's all about women, so fewer journals to search. Let's see what this comes up with. Okay, this looks good. The Story of Seneca Falls. Off Our Backs is more of a political feminist journal. I think that started in the 1960s. So this is I'm not going to click on that one. What else? NWSA Journal, that's the journal for the National Women's Studies Association, so that could be good. And this is a sort of a global look at the idea of suffrage in 1848. Oh, this looks good. This is from Signs, which is one of the main journals in women's history and women's studies. So anyway, you can see how that was useful, but let's go back. And now I'm going to click on, it's getting a bit long, so I'm going to stop in a second. But I'm going to click on history, and I'm going to unclick feminist studies and see what comes up when I do that. So let's see, public historian, Seneca Falls Ghost Public, Ellen Carroll Dubois, or Dubois, I think is how you say her name, is one of the most prominent historians in the field of women's history. So I happen to know that, so I think that would be useful. Some of these articles look a little bit less useful. So you can see that because there's so many journals that are being searched that, oh, this is good. Anne Boylan is a historian of early American history and early women's history in particular, and you can see this is from the Journal of the Early Republic. So that is mainly about the 1700s. So that would be good because that's about the lead up to Seneca Falls. So I would probably click that and use that in my research. Some of these, this is a magazine, a little bit less useful because it's going to have short articles. Anyway, I would keep scrolling. There's a lot from the Journal of Early History. But there's nothing, which is a little disappointing, that just says Seneca Falls in the, I don't think, in the title. But I do know that somebody whose name is Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who helped to organize the Seneca Falls Convention. So I might do another search that's more specific so I can see what her role was in the Seneca Falls Convention. Okay. So this looks perfect. The American Historical Review is, aside from the Journal of American History, or in addition to the Journal of American History, it's the other major and most significant journals within the field of history. Okay, so I think that's it. I'll stop there because I think this has gone on for a while already, but hopefully this was useful. Email me if you have any questions or you're having trouble finding stuff. Okay.